You're such a good boy. It's all right. We'll find you a home very soon.
The morning sun slipped quietly through the tall windows of the shelter, spilling golden light across the rows of kennels. Dust motes danced lazily in the beams, catching the warmth of a day that promised calm. Volunteers moved softly, their footsteps muted on the worn wooden floors. The shelter smelled faintly of soap and straw, with a hint of old fur, comforting in its familiarity. Most of the dogs were asleep or resting, their soft breaths rising in rhythm with the morning. But in the far corner, behind a heavy metal gate, one dog stirred. A large, scruffy mix with deep amber eyes and a coat tangled like old rope, he shifted on his bedding with a low, rumbling growl. No one approached him without caution. His reputation preceded him, a dog known for snapping, lunging, and letting the world know he wanted nothing to do with humans. Volunteers whispered warnings, shaking their heads, their hands hovering nervously over the cage doors. Today, though, the air felt different, almost expectant. A new volunteer entered the shelter, carrying only a small satchel and a quiet presence. She moved slowly, deliberately, letting her calm energy fill the room without demanding it. The other volunteers glanced at her with polite curiosity. The scruffy dog stiffened immediately. His growl rose, low and warning, but then something remarkable happened. He froze. The sound faded. His amber eyes fixed on her, unblinking, focused. Slowly, cautiously, he rose to his paws. The volunteer paused a few steps from his gate. She knelt, keeping her movements gentle, letting the warm morning light fall on her face. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Hey, it's okay," she said. The tone didn't demand obedience, didn't rush him. It simply existed. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The growl never returned. The dog inched closer, stepping with purpose, sniffing the air around her hand. His movements were careful, deliberate, almost as if he were weighing whether to trust. The volunteers watched, wide-eyed, as the impossible happened. The dog's tail twitched. Ears relaxed slightly. His body softened. And then, a tiny, cautious wag. She reached her hand forward. Slowly. Never forcing, never threatening. Just offering. The scruffy mix met her halfway, his nose brushing her palm, tentative at first, then pressing a little firmer, a silent acknowledgement. The shelter seemed to exhale in that moment. Conversations halted. Phones lowered. Cameras forgotten. All eyes were on the subtle miracle unfolding. He looked at her, really looked, with an intensity that went beyond caution. It was understanding. Connection. Recognition. Something unspoken that bridged the gap between his wary world and her calm, patient presence. Her voice stayed quiet, warm. "It's okay, buddy. I'm not here to hurt you." And then the dog did something that would stay with everyone who witnessed it. He sat perfectly still, chest rising and falling in a slow, rhythmic breath, eyes never leaving hers. The shelter walls, usually alive with tension and whispered warnings, seemed to fade away. The golden morning light pooled around them, warm and soft, as if spotlighting the quiet miracle. Every volunteer in the room felt it, the shift, the soft unspoken truth that this dog, so long labeled aggressive, had recognized something rare, something gentle, something he had been waiting for. And in that moment, the room held its breath. What the dog sensed would change everything. CTA after hook, male narration style. Before we continue, remember to like and subscribe for more emotional dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? I love reading your comments. The shelter hummed softly with morning activity. Volunteers moved from kennel to kennel, carrying bowls of kibble, blankets, and gentle words. The sunlight now streamed a little higher, warming the concrete floor with a honeyed glow. Somewhere in the distance, a small bell jingled as the door opened and closed. But in the far corner, the scruffy mix remained still, sitting like a sentinel at the edge of his kennel. His eyes followed every movement, every shadow. There was no growl this time. Instead, a quiet focus, an intensity that seemed almost thoughtful. The new volunteer stepped carefully toward him, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She crouched low, arms open slightly, as if inviting him to make the first move. The dog's nose twitched. He lifted a paw, then set it down. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. He sniffed the air, then turned his gaze toward a second volunteer approaching with cleaning supplies. In an almost imperceptible way, his body shifted, not in aggression, but in a subtle warning, a gentle stay back. Then, as if reassured by the calm presence of the first volunteer, he returned his attention to her. It was a dance of quiet intuition. The dog seemed to know who carried calm energy and who brought tension. Each choice was measured. Every movement carried meaning. The volunteers exchanged amazed glances. They had seen many dogs, many interactions, but never anything like this. The new volunteer reached out again, slowly, letting her hand hover just inches from the metal bars. The dog tilted his head, observing, then nudged the hand gently with his nose. The touch was brief, almost ceremonial, but the meaning was clear. Trust was being offered, carefully, deliberately. She spoke softly, her words floating in the warm light. "I see you. I know you're trying." Her tone carried patience, understanding, and encouragement. He responded with a small, deliberate wag, tail brushing the floor. And then, something remarkable, he leaned slightly forward, pressing his nose against her palm. It was not a rush of affection, but a quiet acknowledgement. The shelter volunteers watched in awe. The dog had chosen her not out of fear or desperation, but out of recognition. He had sensed something about her presence that no one else could offer. Calm. Safety. Patience. And as the morning unfolded, he followed her gaze, matching her movements. He adjusted his stance to mirror her calm energy, showing a soft, intuitive understanding that transcended words. Every flick of his ears, every tilt of his head, was deliberate, a silent conversation only the two of them could understand. It was subtle. It was gentle. And it was completely transformative. The volunteers whispered among themselves, almost reverently. This wasn't just a dog learning to trust. This was a dog recognizing something rare, a connection that felt destined. And in that warm, golden light, it became clear, this dog's intuition was guiding him, choosing moments, choosing gestures, choosing this person, with a quiet, undeniable purpose. The air seemed lighter, charged with possibility. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply watched as the scruffy mix remained silent, focused, and entirely present. His behavior had a meaning no one expected. The morning moved forward in quiet rhythm. Volunteers went about their routines, carrying fresh water bowls, folding blankets, and calling softly to the dogs. The air smelled faintly of soap, straw, and sun-warmed fur. Light filtered in through the tall shelter windows, scattering across the kennel floors in long, golden ribbons. In the corner, the scruffy mix sat motionless, eyes tracking the new volunteer's every subtle movement. There was an attentiveness in him now, something far beyond caution. It was almost as if he were measuring her presence, observing the patterns of her calm energy and responding with gentle precision. One volunteer, a woman with a clipboard, paused mid-step. She leaned against a nearby gate and whispered to another, "I've never seen him like this before, not even close." Her tone carried disbelief, softened with awe. The new volunteer crouched, speaking quietly, barely above a whisper. "It's okay, you don't have to rush." She reached a hand slowly toward the dog, letting him approach at his own pace. The dog sniffed her fingers carefully, then retracted, eyes still locked on hers. He moved closer again, nose nudging her palm. Then, as if deciding something silently, he pressed his forehead lightly against her hand, a brief gesture that carried weight far beyond its simplicity. Around them, the shelter seemed to pause. Volunteers stopped their tasks, exchanging small, astonished glances. One young man whispered, "It's like he understands her. Like he knows she's different." The dog's intuition guided each movement. He didn't jump, didn't lunge, didn't bark. Instead, he mirrored her calmness, his eyes softening, body language relaxing. Every subtle gesture, a tilt of the head, a slow blink, a paw shifting, felt deliberate, a silent dialogue unfolding in the golden morning light. The volunteers couldn't look away. They watched him choose trust, choose patience, choose connection. It was no longer about fear or aggression. It was about recognition, something deeper than any training or coaxing could produce. The new volunteer tilted her head, smiling faintly. "I see you," she murmured. "I really do." The dog responded with a tentative wag, slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. He stepped back, then forward, measuring, testing, and affirming a silent agreement between them. And as the minutes passed, the other volunteers grew more curious, leaning in to watch the subtle exchanges. They whispered to each other, speculating about what he must have sensed, what hidden truth had made him so still, so focused, so calm in her presence. It was a soft, slow revelation. No words could explain it. Only observation, only quiet attention, only presence. By mid-morning, it was clear to everyone in the room, something extraordinary was unfolding. The truth behind his actions was more beautiful than anyone imagined. The sun had climbed higher, spilling warm light into the shelter, casting long, honeyed streaks across the floor. The morning bustle had quieted, volunteers moved with soft efficiency, careful not to disturb the fragile balance in the corner kennel. The scruffy mix remained attentive, eyes tracking the new volunteer as she knelt near his enclosure. She had begun to spend more time with him, each interaction deliberate and calm. She didn't rush. She didn't demand. She simply existed in the same space, her presence steady, warm, and patient. And the dog, once so guarded, so defensive, was beginning to mirror that calm. He stepped closer than ever before, chest lifting, tail wagging in slow, measured movements. Every gesture was intentional, every blink deliberate. When she extended a hand, he nudged it gently with his nose. When she spoke, her words barely above a whisper, he leaned in as if listening not only with his ears but with his heart. The volunteers watched quietly from a distance, holding their breath. They had never seen such a transformation, not through training, not through treats, not through commands. This was something deeper, something intuitive. The dog had chosen her. The new volunteer smiled softly, her voice warm and soothing. "It's okay, we'll take it slow. I've got time." She shifted slightly, letting him approach. He lowered his body just enough to meet her gaze, softening with each heartbeat. She reached out, letting her fingers brush through his scruffy fur. For the first time, he didn't pull back. Instead, he leaned into the touch, pressing his head gently against her hand. The golden light from the window caught in his eyes, revealing a depth of emotion that was impossible to ignore. Around them, the shelter felt suspended in time. Even the other dogs seemed to sense the change. The usual low hum of movement and chatter faded, leaving only soft breathing, gentle nudges, and the quiet rhythm of trust forming. Small moments became their own language. A tilt of the head, a slow blink, a tentative paw reaching out, each gesture spoke of recognition, safety, and acceptance. Every action built on the last, deepening a bond that seemed almost faded. The volunteers whispered to each other, voices hushed. "He's never let anyone this close," one said. Another nodded, eyes wide. "It's like he's choosing her, not just tolerating her, but trusting her." The dog's focus never wavered. Even when a distant noise startled others, he stayed near her, grounded by the calm energy she radiated. It was as if he had decided that in her presence, he could finally let go of fear. Time moved slowly, luxuriously. Every moment became a beat in their unspoken conversation. Her hand rested lightly on his back, his eyes searched hers with unwavering attention. They were discovering each other, piece by piece, without words. And then, as she leaned back slightly to give him space, he responded with a small, deliberate nuzzle. It was subtle, quiet, yet full of meaning, a silent acknowledgement that the trust had deepened, that connection had solidified. For the volunteers observing, it was more than a breakthrough. It was a revelation. This dog, labeled aggressive and unapproachable, had found a kindred spirit, someone whose presence calmed the storm inside him. And in return, he offered his trust, his attention, and the first glimpses of his heart. In that warm, golden light, a truth began to emerge: some bonds aren't taught. Some connections aren't earned through commands or coercion. Some are recognized, felt, and chosen quietly, intuitively, and with complete intention. The dog shifted closer again, his head resting softly near her knee. She looked down, eyes glistening, and whispered, "I see you, and I'm here." And in that moment, it became undeniable. The bond between them was no longer tentative, it was real, intentional, and profound. By late morning, the shelter had settled into a quiet rhythm. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, bathing the kennels in warm, honeyed light. The familiar smells of straw, soap, and fur hung in the air, comforting and soft. Volunteers moved slowly, their voices gentle, their gestures deliberate, careful not to disturb the fragile bond forming in the corner kennel. The scruffy mix sat with the new volunteer, their presence intertwined in a quiet harmony. His ears twitched occasionally, picking up distant sounds, but his focus never wavered from her. Each movement, each blink, each subtle shift in posture seemed intentional, almost reflective. It was as if he were speaking a language only she could understand, a language built on intuition, patience, and trust. The volunteer leaned forward slightly, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "I wonder what it was like for you, before this." She let the words hang in the golden light, giving him space to respond in his own way. The dog nudged her hand gently, then rested his head briefly against her knee. There was no urgency in his gesture, no demand. It was deliberate, slow, and full of meaning. The volunteers watching quietly from a distance exchanged astonished glances. It was the first time anyone had glimpsed the softer side of this dog, a side hidden beneath layers of fear, pain, and survival instinct. As the new volunteer spoke to him, she noticed small cues, scars along his legs, patches of missing fur, a subtle limp in his step. Each detail whispered a story, fragments of a life that had been hard, lonely, and uncertain. Yet he met her gaze with unwavering focus, as if acknowledging that these things didn't define him in her presence. One of the volunteers finally whispered, Do you think he's telling her something?" The dog lifted his head slightly, tilting it in a way that seemed thoughtful, reflective. His amber eyes held depth, a quiet understanding that went beyond instinct. Every subtle action conveyed memory, intuition, and unspoken experiences. The volunteer's voice remained calm, gentle, and warm. "I see you. I see all of you. And it's okay." She extended her hand slowly, palm open. The dog pressed his nose into it, lingering longer than before, almost ceremoniously. The gesture felt like a dialogue, a silent revelation of the past meeting the present. It became clear that this dog's aggression, once so apparent and frightening to others, was not born from malice. It had been a shield, a careful mechanism to keep the world at a safe distance. And now, for the first time, he had chosen to lower that shield, to reveal fragments of himself to someone who had earned his trust, not with treats or commands, but with calm presence and gentle patience. The volunteers remained still, captivated by the quiet revelation. They realized that this moment was rare, almost sacred, the unveiling of a dog's inner world, shared only with the one person who had been recognized as safe, worthy, and kind. The dog leaned slightly closer, tail wagging in slow, deliberate arcs. The subtle shift in posture, the careful attention to her voice and movements, all spoke of a deeper understanding forming between them. The shelter, usually filled with noise, movement, and tension, seemed to hold its breath. Light pooled around them, soft and golden, framing the quiet intimacy of the moment. And as the new volunteer whispered, "I think I understand," a little, the dog rested his head fully against her hand, eyes closing briefly in calm acknowledgement. It was not a rush of affection, not a sudden leap of trust. It was deliberate, considered, and profound. The truth about him was beginning to unfold, gentle, patient, and more beautiful than anyone had expected. The afternoon sun slanted through the shelter windows, turning the room into a warm wash of gold and amber. Dust motes floated lazily in the light, shimmering like tiny stars suspended in a calm universe. The usual hum of the shelter had softened into near silence, broken only by the gentle shuffle of volunteers and the occasional soft bark from a distant kennel. The scruffy mix sat quietly in the corner, his deep amber eyes fixed on the new volunteer. Every muscle in his body was relaxed yet alert. Gone were the sharp growls, the tense stances, the constant edge of wariness that had defined him since he arrived. Now, he seemed present, entirely here, as if the world outside the kennel had faded into a quiet hum around them. The volunteer crouched low, careful not to disturb the fragile rhythm of trust they had built. "It's okay, you're safe here," she whispered softly. Her hand hovered near him, not demanding, not pressuring, just existing, a calm anchor in a room that had often felt chaotic and uncertain. For the first time, the dog did something remarkable. He stepped fully toward her, his front paws resting lightly on the edge of the kennel gate. The movement was slow, deliberate, and intentional. His eyes locked on hers, searching, assessing, and then, a brief, almost imperceptible wag of his tail. The volunteers watching froze in quiet awe. This was a turning point. Something fundamental had shifted. The dog, who had been labeled aggressive and untouchable, was now fully engaging, choosing connection over isolation, trust over fear. She reached forward, gently sliding her hand under his chin. The dog pressed his muzzle into her palm, lingering longer than ever before. His eyes softened, amber warmth meeting her gaze. And in that small, deliberate gesture, the history of his past seemed to speak through him, a history of caution, of surviving alone, of guarding himself against a world that had often been unkind. The room held its breath. Volunteers exchanged glances, voices hushed in reverence. They had never witnessed a dog's emotional world revealed with such clarity, such subtle power. "Good boy, yes, you're doing so well," she murmured, her tone calm, steady, filled with encouragement. Each word was deliberate, each pause intentional. She gave him time, letting him respond in his own rhythm. The dog leaned slightly closer, pressing his head against her chest. It was not an impulsive act, not a sudden burst of affection. It was considered a silent acknowledgement of trust, an unspoken declaration that this human had earned a place in his guarded heart. A volunteer whispered from across the room, I think he's really letting her in." Another nodded, eyes wide. "It's like he's never done this before, ever." And indeed, he hadn't. Every growl, every snap, every defensive movement he had shown before had been armor, a barrier protecting him from a world that had not always been gentle. But now, that armor was softening. Piece by piece, layer by layer, he was revealing himself. The volunteer's voice remained soft, quiet. "You're safe. I promise. No one will hurt you here." She let her hand rest gently on his back, feeling the subtle tension in his muscles slowly ease. Each breath he took seemed deeper, calmer, more relaxed than it had in months, perhaps years. Time seemed to stretch. The room around them faded into a golden haze of light and warmth. Every subtle sound, the creak of a floorboard, the distant hum of a fan, the gentle shuffle of another volunteer's shoes, became background to this moment of quiet revelation. And then, as if to confirm the bond fully, the dog did something extraordinary. He rolled slightly onto his side, exposing his belly in a gesture of complete trust. His eyes never left hers. The volunteers gasped softly. This was a milestone, a profound turning point. A dog who had been deemed untouchable, aggressive, and wary had chosen, entirely on his own, to show vulnerability. The volunteer smiled, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "Yes, that's it. I see you," she whispered. Her voice carried warmth, patience, and quiet pride. She reached under him, gently stroking his side, careful to keep her movements slow and reassuring. He responded with subtle, deliberate nudges, pressing against her hand, his tail flicking in slow, controlled motions. It was not chaotic excitement. It was a gentle, thoughtful expression of trust, intimacy, and connection. The other volunteers continued to watch quietly, captivated. They had witnessed many shelter dogs, many aggressive cases, many moments of tentative interaction. But this was different. This was the unveiling of a soul. A dog choosing, deliberately and intuitively, to trust again. For the first time, it became clear that this dog's reputation was not a reflection of who he was beneath the surface. It was a reaction, a shield, a way of navigating a world that had often been harsh and unforgiving. And now, with patience, understanding, and calm presence, he was discovering another way to exist, one where he could allow safety, love, and connection. The volunteer leaned back slightly, letting him rest against her side. "It's okay, we'll take it one moment at a time." She smiled softly, letting the warmth of the sunlight wash over them. He closed his eyes briefly, chest rising and falling in calm, measured breaths. It was a perfect harmony of presence and trust. Every subtle gesture, every tiny movement, spoke volumes of healing, of intuition, of a connection that transcended words. And as the golden light pooled around them, reflecting in his soft, amber eyes, one undeniable truth emerged: this was a turning point. A quiet, profound moment where the dog had chosen trust, embraced vulnerability, and revealed the possibility of something entirely new: love, connection, and safety. In that moment, the dog was no longer just surviving, he was beginning to live. The late afternoon light poured through the shelter windows, bathing the room in soft amber hues. Dust motes floated lazily in the golden beams, shimmering like tiny fireflies suspended in the air. The shelter had quieted, the usual hum of movement reduced to a gentle murmur. Volunteers moved with slow, careful steps, respecting the fragile rhythm unfolding in the corner kennel. The scruffy mix lay partially stretched out, his head resting lightly against the new volunteer's leg. His amber eyes, deep and thoughtful, followed her every gesture. The subtle tension that had once defined him had softened completely, replaced by a quiet focus and attentive awareness. Every inch of his body communicated presence, trust, and connection. The volunteer leaned forward, voice soft and steady. "You've been through so much, haven't you?" she whispered, letting the words hang in the golden light. "I can see it. I see all the ways the world made you cautious, made you strong, and sometimes, made you alone." The dog nudged her hand gently, pressing against it, as if confirming her words. There was no rush, no urgency, only measured, deliberate acknowledgement. It was as though he had waited his entire life for someone who could truly understand him. A senior volunteer, standing a few feet away, spoke quietly to another. I think he's showing us why he was labeled aggressive. He's not mean, he's hurt, and now, he's trusting for the first time." The dog shifted slightly, ears flicking attentively, tail brushing the floor in soft, slow arcs. The volunteer continued speaking, her words deliberate, patient. "It's okay to let the past go, it's okay to be safe now. You don't have to guard yourself anymore." And then, as if in response, he did something remarkable. He pressed his forehead fully into her hand, lingering, eyes soft and vulnerable. It was the quiet revelation of his history, a silent story told not in words, but in trust, posture, and subtle gestures. The shelter seemed to hold its breath. Volunteers exchanged looks of awe and quiet wonder. This dog, once feared, was not only capable of connection, he was capable of love. He had chosen to reveal his heart, piece by piece, in a way that was gentle, deliberate, and profoundly moving. The new volunteer spoke again, softly, almost to herself. "All this time, you were only protecting yourself. And now you can feel safe, with me, with us." Her hand traced the contours of his scruffy coat, slow and soothing, each stroke a promise of patience and kindness. He leaned closer, pressing his body gently against her side. The subtle contact spoke louder than any words ever could, a declaration of trust, of understanding, of recognition. For the first time, his guarded world had opened, revealing a dog capable of deep emotional bonds, a dog who had only needed the right person to see him fully. The senior volunteer stepped closer, voice hushed. "I've never seen anything like this. He's showing us who he really is. Not the dog everyone feared, but a dog who understands love, patience, and kindness." And in that moment, the room seemed to shimmer with quiet revelation. The dog's past, marked by caution, survival, and guardedness, had been a preparation for this moment, a meeting with someone who could see beyond the surface, who could recognize intuition, heart, and the capacity to trust. The new volunteer whispered, "You've waited a long time, but it's okay now. You're not alone anymore." He pressed his nose against her palm, then rested his head fully against her chest. Every breath, every subtle movement, carried meaning. He had chosen her. He had chosen trust. He had chosen connection. And in doing so, he had revealed a truth more beautiful than anyone could have expected. Beneath the scruffy fur and wary eyes lay a heart capable of profound loyalty, intuition, and love. The volunteers stood quietly, watching, some with tears in their eyes. This was more than a dog learning to trust a human. It was a gentle unveiling of an emotional truth that had long been hidden. The dog's apparent aggression was not cruelty, it was self-preservation. And now, for the first time, he had found someone who understood him fully. As the golden light continued to pour into the room, the dog lifted his head slightly, eyes meeting hers with unwavering focus. There was no need for words. No commands. No coaxing. Only connection. Only understanding. Only the quiet beauty of trust given freely and received fully. The volunteer smiled softly, her voice carrying warmth, patience, and quiet reverence. I see you, all of you, and you're safe now. The dog nudged her hand once more, a deliberate, gentle gesture that spoke volumes. The room felt lighter, warmer, and infinitely more serene. The quiet revelation had transformed not just the dog, but everyone who witnessed it. And as the sun dipped lower, painting the room with longer, softer rays of gold, one truth became clear: this dog's heart, once hidden behind fear and caution, had been revealed, and it was capable of love, connection, and the deepest loyalty imaginable. The truth behind his silence and guarded nature was not anger, it was a heart ready to be seen, and finally, someone had. The late afternoon sun poured through the shelter windows, bathing the room in soft amber and gold. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams, catching on the edges of crates, blankets, and the few stray toys scattered across the floor. The shelter, usually alive with constant motion and chatter, now felt calm, almost sacred. The air was warm, still, and filled with quiet anticipation. The scruffy mix lay stretched out in the corner, his head resting lightly against the new volunteer's knee. His amber eyes were half closed, breathing calm and steady. The tension that had once defined him, growls, snaps, wary stances, had melted away, replaced by a serene, attentive presence. Each subtle gesture spoke of trust earned and a heart slowly healing. The volunteer gently stroked his fur, her voice low and warm. "It's okay, you're safe now," she whispered. Her hand lingered on his shoulder, feeling the soft, scruffy texture, each stroke a promise of patience, kindness, and safety. The dog nudged her hand gently, then rested it under his chin, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared understanding. Around them, volunteers watched quietly. Some had tears in their eyes. Some whispered in hushed tones, almost reverently. "I've never seen a dog like this," one volunteer said. Another nodded. "It's like he's complete now, finally." The dog shifted slightly, pressing his forehead against hers. His amber eyes, deep and thoughtful, met hers with quiet gratitude. No commands. No treats. No sudden excitement. Only presence. Only connection. Only recognition. The senior volunteer stepped closer, voice gentle. "He's ready," she said. "Ready for a home, ready for love, ready to trust completely." It was true. This dog, once labeled aggressive and unapproachable, had revealed his heart to someone who understood patience, intuition, and kindness. His past, marked by caution, survival, and fear, had finally met someone who could see beyond it, and in doing so, had allowed him to begin a new chapter. The shelter coordinator approached with a soft, leather leash and a quiet smile. "Do you want to take him for a walk?" she asked the new volunteer. The dog's ears twitched at the word. He rose carefully, tail wagging slowly, body relaxed but purposeful. He stepped toward her without hesitation, nuzzling her hand as if to say, "I'm ready. I trust you." The volunteer knelt in the soft, sunlit grass outside, letting him explore slowly. He sniffed the air, his movements deliberate, reflective. Every paw lifted, every careful sniff, every flick of his tail spoke of curiosity, intuition, and newfound calm confidence. He returned to her side frequently, pressing close, seeking reassurance, and giving acknowledgement in return. "This is your world now," she whispered softly. "Everything out here is yours to explore, at your pace." The dog circled her once, then sat near her side, tail sweeping the ground in slow arcs. He rested his head against her knee, eyes alert yet peaceful. The golden sunlight caught in his amber eyes, revealing depth, warmth, and a trust that had taken months, maybe years, to form. Inside the shelter, volunteers gathered quietly near the windows, observing from a distance. Some wiped tears from their eyes, voices hushed as they shared whispered reflections. "It's incredible," one said. "To think, all that aggression, all that fear, and now this. He's chosen trust. He's chosen love." The new volunteer looked down at him, her voice calm, deliberate. "You've waited a long time, but it's okay now. You don't have to be alone anymore." She leaned forward, letting her hand brush through his fur. The dog leaned into her touch, eyes closing briefly, savoring the moment. It was not a rush of affection or excitement, it was deliberate, considered, a quiet dialogue of understanding and connection. As the evening sun deepened, painting long shadows across the shelter yard, the volunteer clipped the leash to his collar. "Shall we go?" she murmured. The dog's ears perked. He stepped forward confidently, tail wagging slowly, moving beside her with calm focus and purpose. Every movement reflected trust, awareness, and a bond that had been chosen intentionally. They walked slowly toward the parking lot. The volunteers followed, staying back but watching closely. Each step the dog took seemed to carry freedom with it, freedom from fear, from guarding himself, from a life of uncertainty. He was choosing to exist in this moment fully, alongside someone who understood him. The volunteer paused at the edge of the lot, bending down to meet his gaze. "You're going home today," she said softly. "This is where you belong, where you're safe, where you can finally just be you." The dog's amber eyes held hers. A small, deliberate nudge of his nose into her hand was his answer, acknowledgement, understanding, and quiet joy. In the car, the dog settled calmly on the back seat. His head rested against the seat, eyes alert but serene. He watched the world go by with quiet curiosity. The volunteer reached back, letting her hand brush along his scruffy coat, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. She spoke softly, words carrying warmth, reassurance, and calm. "It's okay, you're safe, you're going to be happy." The drive home was filled with quiet observation. The dog's ears twitched at distant sounds, tail flicking slightly, but there was no tension, no panic, no defensive growl. Only trust. Only awareness. Only the bond they had built in the shelter continuing to grow stronger with every passing moment. When they arrived at the volunteer's home, the sunlight spilled over the front yard, painting it in soft late-afternoon gold. The dog stepped carefully onto the grass, sniffing each corner, exploring slowly but intentionally. He stopped periodically to look back at her, a silent acknowledgement that he was taking each step in his own rhythm, yet never far from her presence. Inside, the home was calm, quiet, and welcoming. Blankets were laid out, toys scattered gently across the floor. The dog explored each corner deliberately, lifting paws, sniffing furniture, and then returning to her side. His tail wagged in slow, thoughtful arcs, a language of trust and connection that needed no words. The volunteer knelt down, letting him press his head against her chest. "You're safe now," she whispered. "This is your place. You're forever." He nudged her hand gently, pressing close. The subtle warmth of the sun streamed through the windows, reflecting off his amber eyes, and for the first time, he seemed fully at peace. The evening stretched, soft and slow. The dog explored the backyard, sniffed the rooms, and then settled near her feet, resting his head in a gesture of calm trust. Volunteers who had accompanied the transition watched from a distance, quietly moved by the transformation. One whispered, "I've never seen a dog so calm, so grounded, so healed." Another nodded, voice hushed, "It's incredible, the way someone's patience and understanding can change a life." The new volunteer leaned back on the floor, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "It's okay, it's all okay now," she said softly. Her voice was warm, steady, full of the quiet joy of someone who had witnessed a heart open for the first time. The dog's eyes met hers, amber warmth glowing in the soft lamplight. He pressed his head into her hand once more, a deliberate gesture that said everything words could not. And in that moment, the story reached its true conclusion. The dog who had once been aggressive, wary, and distant had discovered safety, trust, and love. He had been seen fully, acknowledged deeply, and chosen to allow connection into his life. The volunteers left quietly, smiles soft, hearts full. Outside, the dog lay curled at the volunteer's side, breathing steady, calm, and free. Every gentle movement, every slow wag of his tail, reflected the peace he had found. Every glance at her was a silent declaration: he was home. The sun dipped lower, spilling long, golden rays across the backyard. The shadows stretched softly over the grass, bathing everything in warmth. And in that light, one undeniable truth became clear. The dog had found his safe place, his trust, and his forever heart, and in doing so, he had reminded everyone who watched that patience, love, and understanding can transform even the most guarded souls. As night settled softly over the home, the dog lay curled beside the volunteer, chest rising and falling in calm rhythm. His amber eyes slowly closed, and for the first time in his life, he slept without fear, without tension, without the weight of a guarded heart. The golden light of memory, of trust earned, and of love freely given remained in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed his journey. And in that warmth, one truth shone quietly, beautifully, and forever. Some bonds cannot be forced. Some hearts cannot be rushed. But with patience, calm presence, and quiet understanding, even the most wary soul can be healed.